Ki, Ryotsu, Chakra, Nen, Magic, Fire, apparently. In the end, they all mean the same thing. Power. In Battle Shonen, power is known by different names and comes in many forms. They act as fuels for epic battles, tapestry to paint the stakes, and instruments of every character's very will. In essence, most action shows tend to utilize supernatural abilities. Much like other narrative elements, power systems are tools, whether they be fast and loose like Fairy Tail's magic, or complex like cursed energy. And these tools live and die by their rules, how they are followed, and how they are used. Some shows die, and others just know how to thrive. Let's get it on. World Trigger has gotten a bit more popular nowadays thanks to its second and third season, but it's still lesser known in the West than others in its genre, and I blame every single one. Seriously though, this show is fun and engaging, and I cannot recommend it enough. The premise of the show is pretty simple. Basically, aliens from other dimensions, yes, aliens, keep up, called neighbors occasionally attack our world, particularly a cozy spot in Japan called Mikado City. The counterforce of this threat are our protagonists, who are soldiers for the organization called Border, a defense guard for the Earth that the neighbors have to pay for, just as God intended.
Didn't you already make that joke in my video? I'm the captain now.
World Trigger's a simple story, but make no mistake, this show is big ballin'. On top of having a mostly decent plot structure and endearing characters, the best aspect of World Trigger has to be its power system. Trigger.
Brother, this guy stinks!
Yes, I know, clever, but it gets better, I promise. Triggers are essentially alien weapons the characters use to fight back against the neighbors, powered by an energy source called Tryon. Triggers can be anything from guns, swords, cubes, and whatever else. To use these weapons, the characters undergo a transformation where they recreate their bodies made out of Tryon, while their real bodies are in an Animorph-style pocket dimension. If you know, you know. The most interesting aspect of World Trigger's power system is that what the characters are using aren't treated completely like superpowers. In fact, they're kind of treated like a mystical sword in the stone and more like a loadout in an FPS game. Everyone on Border has mostly the same access to the same tools. You can be a sniper, a gunner, or you study the blade. Anyone can fit any role potentially, but they're determined by two things other than general physicality, but that's a different subject. Those two being Tryon amount and fighting preference. Tryon amount is a bit less self-explanatory. See, Tryon levels don't just determine how powerful your weapons end up being, but also how many Tryon weapons you can equip yourself with. The lower the amount of Tryon you have, the fewer weapons you can get, given how a good chunk of your Tryon needs to maintain your energy body. So the best thing to do is pick a loadout that best fits how you consume energy. Any of the roles I mentioned before are common, but when you see a character with all this stuff in mind, it tells you exactly what kind of fighter they are. For example, take our main character Osamu Mikumo. Osamu, even to this day, is the weakest character in the whole show on his own. No one, and I mean no one, other than actual trainee jobbers, is weaker than this man. This guy is fresh off the boat with the lowest Tryon level in the series. So what's his loadout? His main weapon is the Ray Gust, a melee weapon with the highest level of defense among Border triggers, even compared to barriers. Melee triggers don't suck up a lot of Tryon in general, which with the added defense keeps him in fights a bit longer. He equips it with the Thruster optional trigger for surprise attacks, pinning maneuvers, or to get out of dodge. He distracts or makes strategic pot shots with the Asteroid triggers. Asteroid's got the most base attack power out of any cube triggers in Border, but it's usually easy to dodge. However, it's still a reliable distraction that keeps his hand free and strikes true without him needing to be a good shot like gunners. And he can even delay them for traps. Lastly are the wires he starts using in Season 2, which can not only trip up enemies, but also work in tandem with his teammates and act as markers for enemy locations, all while not draining much Tryon. So TLDR, Osamu is nowhere near a heavy hitter, or much of a hitter at all. He lacks physical agility or talent for combat, and is usually kept in the background while he makes his plays. His setup is frugal, but practical. And this makes scenes where he gets to pop off even more hype because he earns those wins every step of the way, even when he gets help from his much more powerful teammates. You might be wondering though, why is he so weak? Is it possible to even get stronger in World Trigger? I mean, this thing's been going on for 3 seasons and some change, right? Yesn't. See, power progression in World Trigger isn't exactly linear. Pumping your muscles a bunch of times don't equal making bigger ki blasts or whatever. For the most part, once you are born with a certain Tryon level, you don't exactly leave that level for a very, very long time. You can get better, but the stat upgrades will be incredibly minor. Even some of the highest ranked agents in Border can have relatively average Tryon levels. Plus, in this show, no matter how strong you are, one good hit to your Tryon body and you're toast anyway. Meaning the only aspect that matters is skill and strategy. Kitora is a great example of this. She's one of the first agents Osamu meets at the start of the series, and an A-rank border agent, basically the second highest rank in the show. However, much like Osamu, she started out with a severely low Tryon level, and even currently, her levels are pretty average, but she takes things in a different direction. Her main trigger's the Scorpion, a blade with the highest attack power and versatility in Border. It's able to change shape and size for various scenarios, but with very low durability, so blocking attacks with it isn't exactly ideal, neither is stretching it too much. She and Osamu both use the asteroid trigger, but Kitora uses that trigger in the form of a gun, as gun triggers tend to shoot bullets faster with greater range at the cost of bullet control. They both have Spider, but Kitora uses it to zip around the battlefield on her own for the most part. So it's very clear here, Kitora's setup is also very conservative, but she's styling it into a close combat rogue, foregoing defense to up her ability to end fights quickly and dash cancel like a motherfucker. Osamu aims to be a defensive strategist, Kitora's no bitch. Two characters with the same problems and access to the same tools, but dealing with their problems in different ways. It's so simple and much less mystifying compared to most shonen powers, but it nonetheless works well for showing characterization, not to mention world building. Because Border isn't just anime Hogwarts number 69, it's closer to a military organization, a fact that even affects the triggers themselves and how they are used. Experimental and unique weaponry are reserved for the top agents of the organization, while everyone else has to use standard issue gear, meaning in every fight involving another Border member, you know what they know about their weaponry and vice versa. So the game is often about who can capitalize on their strengths better, or who is worse at covering their weaknesses. Not to mention teamwork being the name of the game. And as they move higher up the ladder, they can make modifications to established triggers. For example, this is the Kogetsu, standard melee weapon. Equal attack, equal defense, all reliable. Simple. In Season 3, this mad lad, Ko Murakami, came up with an idea. Everyone will be fighting in a digital building complex with a working light system. So what if you turn out the lights and take the beam out of the saber? They won't know what hit them. And for the most part, they didn't. It's not some huge power-up, but it's a practical cosmetic change, yet one that isn't completely out of left field. You never know what to expect, but when you see it, there's not a hair out of place. It didn't completely decide the fight either, it just upped the stakes a shit ton. All just by changing the settings of a weapon. No different from a sniper getting a better nozzle or how a soldier modifies their knife. And again, anyone can do this, it simply depends on who thinks of it first. And most importantly, how those measures are overcome. The higher up the totem pole you go, the more likely you are to see agents with clever mods or usage of their triggers. It only takes something very small to push you so much further, all while working with the same weapon from the same organization with just enough room to improvise. And all this is set up for when the real show starts, when they have to fight alien trigger users. Unlike our heroes, the neighbor triggers are much more weird and diverse, so individual in function that they barely mesh with one another, and they are extremely powerful. These guys are what would be more in line for any character in a typical shonen story, but in World Trigger, they are raid bosses in a video game. Adversaries with patterns, weapons, and abilities you don't have, with weaknesses you need to figure out just to survive a little bit longer. Very few of these baddies can be stopped by a single character as well, which places teamwork and strategy as an even greater priority. It really feels like the characters are fighting back against much more powerful and advanced civilizations with cooperation and ingenuity. No other point in the series demonstrates this better than the Afto Crater invasion arc. Neighbors from the dimension called Afto Crater incite a massive invasion on Mikado City, all to abduct its inhabitants and harvest their Tryon energy. Multiple major fights break out, each one of them deserving of their own video, but let's focus on one. This guy, Ranbanein, is a neighbor who seemingly has all the cards. This goon has got high Tryon amount, strong shields, and basically every shooting-based trigger we've seen so far, on like all the steroids.
Tastes like shit.
On the good guy side, we got 2 frontline attackers, 1 A-ranked shooter, and a bunch of gunner and sniper scrubs sprawled out on the battlefield. So how do they win? Well, a lot of it's dedicated to simple misdirection. A straight fight would be complete suicide, so every move made was done to divert Ranbanein's attention. The shooter creates a smoke screen, giving the 2 attackers time to put pressure on his defense before he could fire any shots. Midorikawa's grasshopper trigger is a simple support trigger that creates small boosting platforms, good for rogue tactics. And Yosuke has a spear Kogetsu that can redirect its blade potentially past shields, all while the shooter Izumi is giving suppressive fire. Their hit and run tactics seem to be working well, until Ran here takes it to another level.
That's fine now!
He rains down heavy fire on the heroes, forcing them to scramble for cover, which gives him the perfect chance to isolate one of the attackers. They're alone in the hallway, Ranbanein being understandably cocky after overcoming their offense. Still cocky though, because this is still their world. As such, Midorikawa uses the fire extinguisher as a smokescreen, making Ranbanein think he was going to keep up the same tactics as before, running to his team. But Midorikawa calls his bluff and deals the first major blow, cutting his leg. He only uses a couple of triggers throughout the battle, but he manages to deal a major blow to an even stronger enemy. Later on in the fight, where the agents manage to put even more pressure on him due to their positioning and numbers, Ranbanein decides to roam in between the buildings as cover, exactly right where they wanted him. Yosuke jumps down towards Ranbanein, catching him by surprise, but still in firing range. By most stretches, this is where Yosuke would be instantly blown away, even if he uses a shield. Hell, even twice the basic shields everyone uses wouldn't help. But what about all of them? As I said, cooperation and ingenuity. The limitations are also mostly the same. You see, a common thing with a lot of shonen power systems is that characters get this passive aura around them that shields from almost any major injury, and whoever has the bigger number takes less damage. It isn't a bad thing to incorporate, but it does run the risk of being too samey for your battle system, even though it's just an excuse for characters to survive nuclear explosions or whatever. Here's the thing though, World Trigger does not care how high your power level is. A shot to the chest is a shot to the friggin' chest. You can get stabbed, sliced up, limbs cut off, and punctured the same way as everyone else. Most of the time. Every character has access to shield and barrier triggers that can almost never surround the full body like a passive buff. This puts more attention on the character's reaction time and the ability to predict incoming attacks. Losing limbs as often as it happens in World Trigger is also an important factor that can greatly influence how fights may go, especially when most fighters are some kind of dual wielder. It feels way more tense because we know that one false move, one half-ass misplay, and it's over. This ups the tension and keeps fights balanced. And honestly, I think that's the best word to describe this system. Triggers are perfectly balanced, just like their fights. They're limited in the right ways, balanced in the right places, and always finds great creative usage of abilities within that scope. Most importantly, it's just really fucking cool. And I can't wait to tell you all about it. Oh, you thought I was done? Buddy, this series deserves all the spotlight it can get, and I'm bringing that clout. Stay tuned.